Hi everyone, Logan Hertz here with Hazeltine LLC. I thought we'd go into a little bit of case design here. I normally don't like to go to this level of detail, and I would like to do this in a very clear visual format. But my health issues keep getting in the way where I'm not really able to engage at the level of mental capacity I'd like to and do the projects I would like to do. So we'll do a casual look at the principles of case design. I like to start by showing a few scenarios to compare and contrast. So these three different scenarios will be on our friend John Smith, the 35-year-old male with the best health rating. The first thing I want to say is this: I have to make a distinction between case design and policy design. When you look at a policy, you cannot look at any policy, any whole life insurance policy in isolation. You have to situate it within your overall financial picture. So when we're looking here, we're going to be looking at individual policies. So we're by definition looking at it in a very limited sense. I want to be sure that's clear. Once you situate it in your overall financial picture, different things can make sense. I'll give you one good example of this before we go into these policies. Let's say you have a man who's 45 and he gets approved at the standard rate, and then he has a wife who's 42 and she gets approved at a preferred rate. If we look at two whole life insurance policies side by side, the policy on the wife is going to perform better because the mortality costs will be lower. But in most cases, it does not make sense to take out your first whole life insurance policy on the wife. If we looked at it just from a cash value standpoint, just looking at those policies in isolation, it would make more sense to take out a policy on the wife because it's going to perform better. But then we have to zoom out, think big picture, and take into account your overall financial picture. And what you find is that generally speaking, you want the permanent death benefit on the person who is the primary bread earner, which in this case, I should have mentioned the man's the primary bread earner, the woman is a stay at home mother. You want the permanent death benefit on the primary bread earner and or the person who's most statistically likely to die first, and that is the man. So you actually want to take out a policy on the man, a whole life policy first. And of course, if you did do a policy on the wife, you would need to have a term policy on the man, and there's a cost associated with that. So that's just one example among many we could look at where you actually want to take the policy that's designed differently once you situate it in your overall financial picture. Whereas if you look at that policy and the cash value growth in isolation, something else might make sense. So that's just to contextualize this and point out that we're looking at this in a somewhat artificial manner. So we're going to start with this policy here. This is a policy on John Smith, and I'm going to skip straight to the supplemental ledger. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm skipping over a whole lot. So if you don't know anything about whole life insurance or infinite banking, you're probably going to be pretty lost for this exercise. But this is a policy where we're paying a $25,000 premium into the policy. We start off with a $2.2 million death benefit, and our cash value in year one is $13,000. We keep paying that premium. Year two, $25,000 premium goes in. Now our cash value grows by $14,000. So our cash flow efficiency is getting better. Year three, we pay that same $25,000 premium. Our cash value grows by a little more than $20,000. And then by year four, we're cash flow positive. So year four, we pay that $25,000 premium and our cash value grows by more than $25,000. So at this point, the premium is really no longer an issue because every dollar we pay in premium into the policy, we have more than a dollar of cash value available to us. So at this point, the premium should no longer be an issue. The real drawback, the real cost of the policy was this loss of liquidity that we had to suffer within the first 3 years. So it cost us time and money to build that foundation to get the policy started. And then we continue paying that premium. We have the ability to pay this $25,000 premium all the way to age 100, all the way to age 100. So this is an infinite banking style policy that's really structured with a long-term orientation. Why would we want that? Because these policies get better every single year they're in force. So if we scroll back up here, we look at year 10. Year 10, you pay a $25,000 annual premium and your cash value grows by $37,000. Why would you not want to pay that premium? Year 20, you pay a $25,000 annual premium. Your cash value grows by $65,000. Why would you not want to pay that premium? And we can keep right on going. So the cash flow efficiency gets better every single year. These policies age like a fine wine. So if you're happy to pay a premium in year one, where you're taking a loss of liquidity, you should be ecstatic to pay a premium in year 30. Why is it so important? Well, the larger and the stronger the financial house we want to build, the larger and the stronger the foundation needs to be, just proper architectural principles. The foundation in a whole life insurance policy is the base premium, the base premium. So if we want to pay this premium for a longer period of time and build a larger house, we need a larger base premium to support it. So here you can see the breakdown of the policy. Of that $25,000 premium, $10,000 is going into the base premium. Then about $6,000 is going into the term rider, and $8,000 is going into the paid up additions rider. All three of these components work together in whole life insurance. The base premium is the foundation. The term rider is scaffolding that allows us to build higher. And then the paid up additions rider is filling everything in, all the brick and mortar. So we can't look at any of those three components in isolation. All three of them work together to build a properly designed whole life insurance policy. And of course, when I say properly designed, that's a relative term. One of the things I often say is we want to maximize the short term pain in order to maximize the long term gain. We want to maximize the short term pain in order to maximize the long term gain, meaning we need to have a sufficiently high base premium to support paying this total premium for a long period of time. Because if I go back to the supplemental ledger here, a lot of people, including myself, when I first started learning about infinite banking, they immediately see the drawback, which is real. So I pay that $25,000 premium. I have a pretty significant loss of liquidity in year one in this policy. I only have $13,000 in cash value after paying in a $25,000 premium. This is still within the realm of what I would consider properly designed infinite banking policies. Because if you had an all base policy, a generic policy, your cash value for the first 2 years would be zero, which might be fine depending on your use case. That all base policies are fine. I have no problem with them. Okay. But the point I'm making is I could drive this total cash value in year one down even further and build the base larger if I wanted to. So the question then becomes, is there any way I can get more cash value in year one and avoid this pain in the early years? The answer, of course, is yes, but there's a trade off. Keep in mind, everything here is based on actuarial math. There's no shortcuts. The rules of math are not flexible. So, yes, you can get more early cash value, but there's a trade off. And there's always a trade off between short term liquidity and long term performance. So, in order to get more early cash value, we have to reduce the size of the foundation. We have to reduce the size of the base premium relative to the total premium, which means then we can't build as large or as strong of a financial house over the long run. So, let's look at the opposite extreme. I'm keeping these policies within the same insurance carrier just because once you start comparing among different carriers, it's no longer really an apples to apples comparison. In fact, there really is no true apples to apples comparison. There's so many things going on here, but let's keep it within the same insurance carrier and let's look at this policy. Actually, let's go to the supplemental ledger. So here we pay a $25,000 premium on this policy. And look at in year one, we have more than $20,000 of cash value. Wow, what a difference. Just for comparison to go back. In this policy, we pay $25,000 in year one, and we only have $13,000 available to us. In this other policy, we pay $25,000, and in year one, we have more than $20,000 available to us. Wow. That's pretty cool, right? And then in year two, we pay that $25,000 premium. Now our cash value grows by $23,000. So we're almost already cash flow positive. And then in year three, we pay in that $25,000 premium and our cash value grows by more than $25,000. Wow. So we took a much smaller loss of liquidity in the early years. That's great. And notice also the death benefit that you start with is much smaller. I don't want to skip over that. The death benefit is important. So, what's the trade off? Notice this policy, we stop paying premiums in year 8. We can only pay premiums in the policy for 7 years. We have to stop paying premiums in year 8. Why? Because we didn't build the foundation large enough. We built a very small foundation, so we can only build a very small financial house on it. This is important because, again, these policies age like a fine wine. They get better every single year that they're in force. So if you're happy to pay a premium in year 1, why would you not want to pay a premium in year 8? You built that foundation for a reason. You want to take advantage of the time value of compound interest and the way that whole life insurance policies work. The first year is the worst year from a cash value standpoint. It's the least efficient year from a cash value standpoint. And then every year after that gets better. So, a common phrase you'll hear in infinite banking is we want to pay the highest possible premium for the longest possible time frame. We want to pay the highest possible premium for the longest possible time frame. That time frame is important because we want to be able to take advantage of those later years of significant cash flow efficiency. And this policy does not enable us to do that. Now, I'm not saying this policy is bad or wrong. It's just understand it has a more short term orientation. Understand there's always a trade off there. There's always a trade off between short term liquidity and long term performance. So the more we skinny down the base premium, then the less we can build. So if we go back up here and look at the premium structure, in this one, notice how the base contract premium is much smaller, only $2,600 relative to the total. The term rider is $1,700, and then the paid up additions rider is $20,000. So because the foundation is smaller, we can't go for as long. And just for comparison, let's go back up to this longer premium paying period here. The base contract is $10,000 of the $25,000. In this policy, $10,000 of the $25,000 of total premium is going to base. It's going to your foundation because you need a stronger foundation to support this longer premium paying period. In this policy, your base is only $2,600. So since we have a skinnier base, a smaller foundation, we cannot pay premiums for as long. What that means is, just look at this. Year 30, you'll be 65 years old. John Smith will be 65 years old, nearing retirement age. He still has the ability to pay this $25,000 premium. And when he does that in year 30, his cash value will grow by $112,000. Why would you not want to pay that premium? Why would you not want to pay that premium? If you set up your own private bank, when do you want that bank to stop receiving deposits? And do you want those deposits to be large amounts or small amounts? And it's more important here because with whole life insurance, the policies get more efficient every single year they're in force because the mortality costs are front loaded and because just compound interest over time. You want to be able to take advantage of those later years. You want to be able to pay premiums in the later years where the policy is so much more efficient. So here in year 30, we can pay that $25,000 premium. We have about $1.6 million in cash value and $3 million in death benefit. In this other policy, if we go to year 30, we don't have the ability to pay a premium. In fact, let me go to the supplemental ledger. Year 30, we don't have the ability to pay a premium. We have $683,000 in cash value and $1.1 million in death benefit. Now, I can play around with these policies all day long. Again, I need to create more of a visual. This video doesn't really give you much of a visual, but just understand proper financial structure. You need a properly laid foundation. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with the shorter premium paying period. That's totally fine. I just want you to understand the trade-off that is being made. So when you see that high early cash value, understand there's always a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. And then this is an in-between option here. So here, We pay that $25,000 premium. We have $14,000 of cash value. In this one, you still have the ability to pay a premium, but it drops down at age 66, year 31. So this is an in-between option. We go up to look at the premium structure. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. We see the base is a little lower, 8,800 rather than 10,000 of that $25,000 total premium. Now, something else I want to show you. One of the reasons why policy structure is important, I'm going to get into some inside baseball. There's something called a MEC, a modified endowment contract. One of the reasons why we have to structure contracts the way that we do is we have to have a certain amount of death benefit relative to the premium we're paying in order to keep the policy tax free. We have to keep the IRS happy. But for everything here, it's got to be tax free. It's got to be within IRS guidelines. It's got to meet their definitions of life insurance. That's part of the reason why we have a term rider, because an inexpensive way to add more death benefit to any policy is to add term, because term life insurance is very inexpensive. So most, not all, but most infinite banking style, cash value style, whole life insurance policies will have some kind of a term rider for that very reason. When you see some of these very skinny base premium designs with a lot of high early cash value, you need to be suspicious, because what's going on, and I think in many cases the agent simply doesn't know, is that they're building in a risk that the policy might become a modified endowment contract. If that happens, not only is your policy taxable going forward, all the cash value that you use is taxable, but also it's retroactive as well. So it can be a huge problem. And when we look at this policy, it's going to tell me it's not a MEC. It's not a MEC as illustrated. Let me see if I can find that. The non-guaranteed values illustrated avoid MEC status. In the contract, there's some very important language where it says the policy as illustrated is not a MEC, is not a modified endowment contract. And every properly structured policy is going to say that. The policy as illustrated is not a MEC. It's not a modified endowment contract. Nowhere does it say we guarantee that this policy will never become a modified endowment contract. It doesn't say that. You have to be working with an agent who knows what he's doing. And so a lot of these skinnier base premium designs like that seem to get you the best of both worlds, where you get more early cash value and cash value over the long run, are building in the risk of a modified endowment contract. This policy right here, as an example, is not super skinny base premium, an $8,800 base premium with a $25,000 overall premium. But let me show you something. This is the alternate ledger. This assumes the dividends go down by a quarter point for the life of the policy. So it assumes a 0.25% reduction in dividends. Now let's look at this ledger. So obviously the cash value growth won't be as good, but here's what I want to skip down to. Oh, what's that little M right there? What does that mean? Well, that M stands for a MEC, modified endowment contract. What it's saying is that there is a risk that this policy could become a MEC. Here, if you're still alive at age 97, this policy, if you paid this full premium and the dividends went down, would potentially MEC. And then you'd have a serious tax problem late in life, potentially. Now, I'm not trying to scare anyone. There are ways to navigate this. But the point that I'm making is that a lot of these skinny base premium designs that you see out there with super high early cash values, a lot of the agents who are selling those policies and the people buying them don't realize they're building in the risk of a MEC. It might be fine for the first 5, 7, even 10 years. It might MEC in year 20. And so if you take out a policy like that, you might not realize you have a problem until much later. So is that worth the risk? Is that worth the risk to get that earlier cash value? Well, that's a question for you, but I just want to make sure people are making fully informed decisions. This was very haphazard. I can do a much better job of presenting this visually if I were fully healthy, which I'm not. But this, I think, shows you opposite ends of the spectrum. So if we go back over here, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, this is the short-term oriented policy. We get much more early cash value, but then we lose the ability to pay the premium fairly quickly, and that's the trade-off. So it's a short-term oriented policy. It gets us more early liquidity, but then less long-term performance. Here's the opposite end of the spectrum, where we have a lot less early liquidity, only 13,000 of the 25,000, but we get much better long-term performance because we built that foundation and now we can build a much larger financial house going forward. I hope this was somewhat helpful. The basic point is that there's no free lunch. It's all trade-offs. If you want a larger and stronger long-term financial house, you need to build a larger and stronger foundation. And in whole life insurance, that is the base premium. So a higher base premium is probably a good thing. It's probably a good thing. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. We'll talk again soon.